best possible players. And Russell Westbrook, the question they have is he better than Chris Paul? I would say personally, in a vacuum, no. I would rather have Chris Paul, unless the other person who wants me to be a different person is James Harden because he hated Chris Paul.
On the other end of this trade, we have the Thunder. Not only did they get veteran point guard Chris Paul on a shorter contract than Westbrook, but they have acquired 2 more first-round picks and 2 more pick swaps. Pablo, where does this leave the Thunder?
It leaves them in as good a place as they could possibly be given the constraints on a small market team who just had to trade their top 2 players. You tell any small market GM, guess what? Your 2 best players just requested trades. What do? They panic and cry, and we get to all these conversations about how things need to be different. But Sam Presti did the impossible, man. He gave Paul George what he wanted, he gave Russell Westbrook what he wanted, and he gave the fans of Oklahoma City a future. They have picks, man, into 2026. They have more picks than anybody could have ever imagined.
And those picks are good because they've been good at making those picks. They've made many selections that have seemed to pan out quite well, and you could possibly package those to get another star if need be. But you brought up the name that I care about, is Sam Presti, because like he and a few other general managers have matured and have evolved in this modern ecosystem. And rather than complaining and these craftsmen blaming their tools and everyone saying these players have too much power, he recognizes that the players have power and he's making decisions that put him in a position to get players going forward. So you talked about how he sent Paul George where he wanted to go.
Yep.
He also sent Westbrook where he wanted to go and apparently had a better offer. Could have gotten more assets from Miami, but Westbrook wanted to go to Houston, so he sent him there. And you could argue that he's not doing what's best for the franchise, but I think he's absolutely doing what's best for the franchise, because how else or what better way can you attract a superstar when he's a free agent than go to him and say, look, you can sign a 3-year deal, you can sign a 4-year deal. Whenever you want to go, I'm going to get you out of here to where you want to go. That's what gets guys in there, and that's how you sell players.
He did seem to take care of those guys, and that is the number one thing all of these teams want to do, by the way. Daryl Morey wants to take care of James Harden because James Harden kind of has all the power now in Houston because that owner wants to empower him too. Sam Presti, what he needed to do, man, was figure out how do I make lemonade out of all of these lemons. And so he has a war chest. He really does. And so does he want to go and make this team a contender in the present, right? Because he has Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the young cornerstone point guard of the future. But now he has a guy who I just said is better than Russell Westbrook in 2019. Yeah. So do you see him pivoting? Does that make sense? Or would you just play the future long game?
I think that you potentially pivot. You could try to play the future long game because they are good at drafting, but I think this speaks to the changing dynamics in the NBA. And we saw what Toronto did last year. They got a guy on a very short window and made a run. These short windows are going to be happening more often and more often, and it's hard to get guys to commit long-term to a place like Oklahoma City, but I think it could be reasonable that you can point to the fact that you take care of your players, you can point to the fact that Kawhi has ascended in another way when you bring guys in and say, look, OKC is a well-run organization, maybe arguably not always well coached, but it's a place that you can come for a short stop. If you are not New York City, which we can argue doesn't do well, or you're not LA, you're not going to convince anybody to come here and have a long career here, but you might be able to convince some free agents to come 1 or 2 years, and then we'll send you where you want to go.
But the other big news of this is that it really doesn't matter how awful the contract that you have on your books is, because part of the Kawhi Leonard era of the NBA, in which 1 year can win you a title and changing it up for 1 year can mean everything. Other teams are going to be desperate. Yeah. Other teams all want into the pool, so you could have the Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook, by some lights, had 2 of the 3 worst contracts in the league, but they both got moved for stuff.
Stop calling bad contracts. We're going to fight about that later.
Up next, by the way, the NBA hasn't